I had an ostrich named Emily, I had a cow named Emily, and I had a chicken named Emily. So clearly a creative career was not in my future. So then I went off to medical school, and in my second year of medical school, I watched a documentary called Making the Connection. And it was all about making the connection between what was on our plate and what impact it had on our health, on the environment, and on the animals. And I made that connection that my chicken burger was my friend Emily, and my spaghetti bolognese was my friend Emily as well. And so once I made that connection, I decided that I didn't want to eat meat anymore. And what I didn't realize was, even though I went vegan for the animals 10 years ago, it would have an impact on my health. And so within a week of going vegan, my concentration improved, my PMS went away after the first month, my periods got lighter, and I just felt so much better. And then I was in medical school, and I thought, well, if a vegan diet can improve my health, what about all of the patients that I'm seeing? Can it improve their health as well? And I think medical school in South Africa is similar to America, where we don't really learn about nutrition as doctors. And so I came to the Barnard Medical Center in Washington, DC, and spent a month shadowing plant-based physicians, seeing how they were educating people about nutrition. And every patient I saw lost 100 pounds, came off their diabetic medication. And I thought, hold on, I was taught that diabetes can't be reversed. Hypertension, heart disease, these diseases are things that stick with you for life. And now I was seeing all of these patients reverse their disease. And so I thought, cool, this is going to be my career. And other than waking up at 5 in the morning to milk the almonds for my almond milk for my coffee, going vegan was pretty easy for me. So, why is diet so important? Why do we even bother what we eat? If pizza tastes good and ice cream's good, why don't we eat that 3 times a day? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I don't really enjoy being sick. And I'm not sure if you've seen anyone with diabetes or cancer or heart disease, but these diseases cause a lot of suffering. And when I saw my patients, a lot of them started to not care if they lived or died anymore because they were suffering so much. And no one really wants that. And so the reason why nutrition is so important is because it could be the difference between you getting these diseases and you living a long and healthy life. So if we look at the top 10 causes of death in America, the only one that is not directly associated with nutrition is accidental injuries. And if you include alcohol in nutrition, I guess you could say that all of the top 10 causes are associated with nutrition. Heart disease, cancer, COVID-19, stroke, diabetes, kidney disease, all of these diseases can largely be prevented by choosing a plant-based diet. And not only be prevented, but some of them can be reversed just by changing what is on your plate. Now, I know you're probably thinking, COVID, that's just an infectious disease, right? Either you get the virus and you get the disease, or you don't. Well, there were some researchers who, when the virus started to migrate out of Wuhan, China, they looked at healthcare professionals. They looked at their diets, and they found who was plant-based, who was not, and they followed them up for a couple of years. And what they found was those who followed a plant-based diet were less likely to get moderate to severe COVID. So they were less likely to be hospitalized, less likely to need a ventilator, to need oxygen. And not only that, but they were also less likely to get infected in the first place. Because when you have a pandemic and you're exposed to all of these infections, your health before exposure is really important. So if you're sitting with diabetes and heart disease and being overweight and chronic inflammation and having a suppressed immune system, then that is going to increase your risk of getting these diseases and getting really sick from them. So they found that plant-based diets were protective against COVID-19. And we can't really prevent the next pandemic, but we can prevent how our body reacts to the next pandemic. And I'm not sure if anyone here has heard of the blue zones, where everyone lives to over 100, all of the healthiest, oldest people. And these are not, it's not like old age homes where everyone's bedridden and they can't do anything, but when these people are 90, 100 years old, they are still active members in the community. They're gardening, they're exercising. And one of those blue zones is Okinawa, Japan. And during the pandemic, what they found was Okinawa, where people ate sweet potatoes and veggies and beans, they had 1/16 of the death rate compared to Tokyo. And so what you eat today is really going to affect your future. The Global Nutrition Report from 2021 estimated that 1 in 4 diseases is due to improper nutrition. That's eating too many animal products, eating too much processed food, and not eating enough plants. So if you think that 41 million deaths are due to non-infectious diseases, diabetes, heart disease, all of these diseases kill 41 million people every single year. Imagine if we could prevent 10 million of those deaths just by changing what we eat. So the next question is, when should you start to worry about your health, right? I'm almost 30. I don't have any risk factors for heart disease, no family history really. I don't have any other diseases. So should I be worrying about my health now? Do I start to worry when I'm 40, 50 years old? When's the right time to start to be concerned about what's on your plate? When's the right time to start to be an active participant in your health? There was a study that looked at American soldiers that had unfortunately been killed in action, and they did autopsies on these guys. Now these guys were less than 35 years old, America's finest, fit, healthy, peak of their lives, right? And 78% of them already had plaque in their arteries. When these guys are young, they're 20, 30 years old, and they've already got the early stages of heart disease. So now maybe I'm thinking, okay, I should start to be concerned in my 20s, right? Well, if we look at babies who were born to mothers who had high cholesterol during their pregnancy, these babies already have fatty streaks in their arteries, which is the early stage of atherosclerosis. So even now, I could already be at a disadvantage from what happened when I was a baby. And if we look at other antenatal factors, moms who gain a lot of excess weight during their pregnancy put their kids at risk for breast cancer and diabetes later on in life. So you could already be at risk because of something that happened to you before you had control over your diet. And lifetime exposure matters. So what you do today is affecting your health in 10, 20, 30 years' time, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is disease. So there was a massive study that looked at people who lowered their cholesterol and looked at what effect it had on their heart disease. And normal or ideal cholesterol is less than 130, high is more than 160, and then there's the intermediate zone. And they looked at people who lowered their cholesterol by 36 points. People who lowered their cholesterol by 36 points over 5 years reduced their risk of heart disease by about 40%. People who reduced it by 36 points over 12 years reduced their risk of heart disease by around 50%. If we looked at people who reduced it over 52 years, they reduced their risk by 80%. So again, it's just this theme of no matter what age you are, you need to start to eat for your future health. And now you may think, okay, great, so a plant-based diet is good for cholesterol, right? It's high in fiber, we're not getting the cholesterol or saturated fat from animals. But what about cancer? What about heart disease, diabetes, all of these other diseases? Do I now have to eat different foods for each one of these diseases? But the great thing about a plant-based diet is it's the exact same diet that reduces your risk of every single disease. And you don't have to go 100% vegan tomorrow to get the benefits. Just including more plants, reducing the amount of animal products in your diet is going to improve your health. So if lifetime exposure matters, I want to give you the example of a jar of rice. So if you imagine you've got a jar of grains of rice in front of you, and each grain of rice represents one day of your life. Every time you eat a meal that is high in processed foods and animal products, so think like a McDonald's Egg McMuffin, I want you to imagine taking a grain of rice out of that jar. Because when you eat unhealthy foods, you actually are taking away from your lifespan. And every time you eat a nice salad with some sweet potatoes and some walnuts and beans, you're adding another grain of rice into your jar and you're prolonging your life. Obviously, it's not as easy of a science as that, but it's that concept that we are eating to improve our life in the long term. But none of this matters if you don't have a place to live. Every time you go to the shop or the restaurant, you are paying for the kind of world that you want to live in the future. And supply is dependent on demand, right? So if someone has a shop and no one's buying their food or their products that they're selling, you're not going to make more of it, right? You would be a fool to do so. But if lots of people are buying your product, you're going to start to create more of it. So it's actually quite logical. And every time you buy an egg or a piece of cheese or a piece of meat or a steak, you are voting with your dollars to say, I want more of this in the world. And so farmers raise and slaughter more animals, more cheese gets produced, more eggs get produced. And as we heard Alyssa say earlier, animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of global warming. If we look at plant-based diets, vegetarian diets, Mediterranean diets, animal-based diets, a plant-based diet has the lowest greenhouse gas emissions compared to any other diet. And it's usually at this time that someone will jump in and say, but it's all of the soy and the corn that's causing deforestation in the Amazon and causing these greenhouse gas emissions. And it's the vegans that are causing this, right? They're the problem. But a 2018 analysis found that livestock produces just 18% of calories globally, while taking up 83% of farmland. And if corn and soy are the problem, where does 90% of that go? It's going to feeding the animals. It's a very inefficient process. And so plant-based diets are basically just cutting out the middleman, and we are going straight to the plants for our protein. Right, so let's look at designing your plate for a healthier tomorrow. I know protein is everyone's biggest concern, right? You're getting plants, how do you get your protein? And most Americans actually get around double the amount of protein that we need. Women only need around 45 grams a day, men around 55 to 60 grams a day. And you can probably get that in one meal. It's not a lot. But we have just focused on protein. People get an average of 90, 100 grams, and it's really too much. You don't need that much protein. And the source matters just as much as the amount. So when you're eating animal protein, it's coming packaged together with heme iron, which is carcinogenic. The iron that comes from meat is one of the ways that meat causes cancer. It's coming packaged together with saturated fat, which causes heart disease and diabetes. And when you cook it at high temperatures, like over a barbecue, it creates other compounds that also cause cancer. So going to animal meat to get your protein is like going to a cigarette to get your oxygen, right? You're still going to get that oxygen, but it's coming together with all of these other compounds and chemicals that cause cancer. Red and processed meat have been listed as a carcinogen on the World Health Organization's list of carcinogens since 2014. So just 100 grams of meat, which is a steak the size of a palm, increases your risk of colon cancer by 12 to 17%. 30 grams of processed meat, which is just 2 rashers of bacon, right? It's not a lot, increases your risk of colon cancer by 36%. So if you think you're eating this bacon every single day with the saturated fat and the eggs and the processed white refined bun and everything, you are just feeding disease. And you have at least three opportunities every day to either feed disease or fight it with what's on your plate. When you get protein from plants, however, it doesn't come with all of these cancer-causing and disease-causing compounds and chemicals. Then it comes packaged together with fiber and other nutrients that are health-promoting. If we look at carbohydrates, carbohydrates exist on a spectrum. So you have unprocessed carbs all the way to ultra-processed carbs, right? So if we look at the potato as an example, the humble vegetable that's anything from French fries to vodka, it's like the other vegetables aren't even trying really. If we look at just the plain potato, that is unprocessed, right? Also in the group of unprocessed foods are vegetables, fruits, anything that you can just pick off the tree and eat it like that. Then we move over to minimally processed. This is when you cook something, you boil it, you maybe add some salt, but that's about it. That's all you do. It still looks like the food in its original form. Then we move on to highly processed. This is like French fries, because now we've deep fried it, we've added preservatives, we've added all these spices. And then after that you get to ultra processed, which is like the crisps you get in a potato bag. It doesn't really resemble the original food, and really this is more of a food-like substance rather than an actual food. Now you've taken potatoes, you've mashed it up, you've added flour, oil, spices, all of that. So as we move from unprocessed all the way to ultra-processed, we should be eating less and less of these foods if we want to promote a healthful diet. most of our fruit should come in the unprocessed and minimally processed forms. So we're talking fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, and not looking at all of these cakes and biscuits and burgers and all of that. Plant-based carbs come to get packaged together with fiber, which is the indigestible part of the plants. Importantly, fiber is not found in animal products. It is only found in plants. And fiber is important because it helps to promote healthy bowel movements. So if you think about eating this meat, which now has all of these cancer-causing compounds, if that just sits in your gut for a couple of days, all those cancer-causing compounds have a long time to start to cause mutations and cause cancer. Whereas fiber groups it all up and it gets it out of your system as quickly as possible. Fiber also reduces cholesterol, blood sugar, and is great for weight loss because it actually reduces the amount of calories that are being absorbed by the food. So if you take a tablespoon of peanut butter and you eat it alone versus a tablespoon of peanut butter with an apple, you actually absorb less calories and less fat when you eat it together with the apple and with the fiber. And it promotes a healthy gut microbiome. So there are more bacteria in your gut than cells in your body. And people forget about this and they don't realize how important it is, but we need to feed those bacteria with fiber in order to promote a healthful gut. Everyone's getting a little crazy. If we talk about fat quickly, we get the saturated fats, which are found in animal products, tropical oils like coconut oil and palm oil, and in processed foods. And those are the fats that we don't want. This is the fat that increases your cholesterol, increases your risk of diabetes and heart disease. What we do want is the plant sources of fat, which are the polyunsaturated fats. Those are your omega-3s. Those you get from nuts and seeds. And so you really want to reduce your amount of fat from animal products and increase your amount of fat from plants. Who's heard that sugar causes diabetes? Yeah, it's pretty common. But saturated fat is actually more of a problem. So what happens with diabetes is when you eat carbohydrates, it gets turned into blood sugar that's in your blood, and that obviously needs to get into your cells so that you can use the sugar for energy. And so your pancreas secretes insulin, and that goes to the key to the cell, kind of like a lock and key. So insulin will unlock your cells, and it causes these little channels to be inserted into your cells so that glucose or sugar can get from your blood into your cells, right? So that's how it should happen. What happens when you eat a lot of saturated fat is that fat all gets stuck inside the cell. So instead of a key just going into a lock and turning it nice and easily, you can imagine that your neighbor was upset with you for, I don't know, your cat pooed on the grass or whatever, and you go and you stick gum into the key, into the lock. So now you're putting the key in, but it's not turning, and that's what saturated fat does when it's stored in our cells. Insulin comes and it tries to open the cell, but this fat has gotten everything stuck, and so now insulin doesn't work. So it's not the problem that you're eating sugar, it's the problem that your cells don't know what to do with it. They can't process it, they can't get it into the cells. And what we see is that when people stop eating the saturated fat in their diet, their blood sugars go down because now their body can actually process the food and they know what to do with the sugar. The sugar can get into the cells again. And so if you've heard of Mastering Diabetes, it's a great program. And what they found is that people, once they remove the fat from their diet, they can actually start to eat a lot of fruit. And the fruit doesn't spike their blood sugar levels anymore because now it can get into the cell and it's not staying in the arteries. All right, so we're quickly going to just go over a few common myths and misconceptions about a vegan diet. So raise your hand if you've heard any of these. You can't get enough protein on a vegan diet. Anyone heard that? Yeah. I see all the vegans and people wearing like the animal shirts are raising their hands. If vegans got $1 for every time we heard that or heard where do we get our protein, we would probably be richer than Elon Musk. But as I've mentioned, plants have all of the essential amino acids. They have all the protein we need. And in America, we're actually eating too much protein. I don't know if you've ever seen a vegan with a protein deficiency, but I don't think that even exists. Because the only people that get protein deficiencies are babies in Africa who have kwashiorkor, or people with cancer who aren't able to get enough calories or aren't able to absorb calories. But if you just get enough calories for who you are and your activity level, you'll be getting enough protein. It's really not something that we need to be concerned about. Has anyone heard that you need to eat cholesterol for your brain health? Yeah, because cholesterol is part of the brain, it makes the brain. In your brain you have nerves and they're covered in myelin, which is a fat to insulate the nerves. And people often say that you need to eat cholesterol for brain health. But did you know that your liver makes all of the cholesterol that you need? You don't have to get anything from your diet. Did you know that your blood-brain barrier actually prevents cholesterol from getting to your brain? So even if you're eating cholesterol in your diet, that cholesterol is not getting to your brain. That molecule is too big. And so your brain actually produces all of the cholesterol that it needs. So cholesterol is not an essential nutrient. You actually don't need to get it from your diet. Right, who's heard that plant protein is less digestible than animal protein? Yeah? So there are a couple of protein scoring systems that researchers use. And the problem is that they use rats and pigs. Anyone here a rat or a pig? No. Because our digestive systems are so different. We have different amounts of acid in our stomach, different gut microbiomes, different lengths of intestines, and all of this affects how protein is absorbed. So it's not really applicable to us. The other issue with these is that they often use raw foods. So they're using raw beans, raw rice, right? We don't eat that, we cook it. And when you cook things like beans and rice, it increases the availability of these proteins and amino acids. So these protein scoring systems really are not designed for humans, but it's the best we have. Until we start looking at the human ileum, which is the small intestine. If we look at these foods in their cooked form, in a human intestine rather than an animal intestine, we see that there actually isn't really a difference between plant proteins and animal proteins. And for the guys that want to build muscle, when you look at people who eat a vegan diet or people who eat animals, as long as you're getting the same amount of protein in each diet, they have the same muscle gains, they have the same strength gains, they have the same synthesis of their muscles, so their muscles grow at exactly the same rate, just as long as you're getting the same amount. Because, again, plant proteins aren't actually less digestible, it's just the tools that we measure them by that are a bit flawed. Right, another one is that vegan diets increase the risk of fractures, right? Or osteoporosis, because we're not getting milk. Well, we're taught when we're younger that you need dairy for healthy bones, right? Again, are you a baby cow? No, then you don't need to eat dairy milk. It's just as crazy as if you're saying you need to eat dog milk, right? If you don't need dairy milk, you don't need goat milk, you don't need dog milk. But people are very creative with their marketing, and we've been led to believe that we need to have dairy. Imagine if in the mornings you went to your dog and you were like, come here girl, mama's got to get some milk for her coffee. It would be absolutely bizarre. But we've just normalized that milk from cows is natural. So as long as you're getting enough calcium and vitamin D, there is no increased risk of fractures in vegans. Right, another common one, I think we've just got 3 more here. Vegan diets are not safe for kids, right? Sure, that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions. One of the largest nutrition academies, the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, has released a position statement saying that vegan diets are safe for every single age, from babies or toddlers, moms, pregnancy, lactation, old age, everything in between. A vegan diet can be sufficient. Obviously, you do need to make sure your kid's getting enough vitamin B12 and fats, but any kid needs to be on a well-planned diet. At the moment, we have more childhood obesity and more childhood type 2 diabetes than ever before. Type 2 diabetes was a disease that was just found in adults, but now we have kids who are 12 years old who are getting this adulthood disease. And that's because of the food that we're eating. You feed a kid McDonald's and, no one bats an eye, but give them broccoli and everyone goes crazy. But what you're feeding them when they're young is setting them up for success in their future. Not only does disease start in childhood, but you're also putting in place their dietary patterns that they will follow for the rest of their life. Once you've eaten a certain way, when you're 20 years old, it's really difficult to change your diet once you've been used to it for 20 years. And so we really have a responsibility to make sure that we are feeding our kids well. And the last one is that soy. Do you guys know what soy is? Tofu, all of those, edamame beans. Soy causes breast cancer or infertility or breast growth in men, right? I'm sure we've all heard that. But if soy caused breasts to grow, then don't you think plastic surgeons would be out of a job? Instead of having a big boob job and massive surgery with the drains and all of that, imagine if you could just drink a couple glasses of soy milk and grow your breast. I mean, there would be no need for plastic surgeons. And there's a difference between the estrogens that are found in soy and the estrogens that are found in animals. Animals are like us, we're all mammals, and so the estrogen that we get from dairy milk, from the meat that we're eating, that has the exact same effect in our body. But the estrogens that come from plants actually have a different effect because they're not exactly the same. They're similar, sure, but they have a different effect. And so we've actually seen that soy from tofu, from soy milk, from beans, reduces the risk of breast cancer. And if someone already has breast cancer and you start to eat soy and tofu and all of that, we've actually seen that it reduces the risk of dying from breast cancer and reduces the risk of recurrence. And for the men who are concerned, there have been studies where they've looked at sperm, they've looked at the motility, the count, the number, all of that. And they found that guys who eat soy and tofu and all of that have exactly the same sperm count, same motility. If we look at people who are trying to fall pregnant, they have the same positive outcomes compared to people who don't eat it. So it really does not have any detrimental effect. Sorry, and the last one is that vegan diets are expensive, right? I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why people don't go vegan is because they say, oh, it's too expensive. And if you look at some of the poorest populations in the world, they eat rice and beans, and they eat vegetables. That's where they get their nutrition from. I spent some time in Garissa, which is a rural town in Kenya. This town doesn't have roads, it's just dirt, and they live in shacks and all of that. And all they eat every day is beans, rice, cabbage, because those are the foods that are cheap and freely available. If you're going to go and eat all of the Beyond Meat and all of the plant-based cheeses and that every single day, then it can get expensive because that's still a bit of a niche market. But if you focus on the whole foods, the legumes, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, if you focus on the food that we were designed to eat and meant to eat, then a plant-based diet really isn't any more expensive than a meat-based diet. And in fact, it can actually be cheaper. And one of the reasons why often plant-based diets or plant-based options can be more expensive, like if you go to McDonald's, like a salad seems pretty expensive there. And that's because the government subsidizes animal farming, and billions of dollars are given every single year to make meat and dairy cheaper for us. Whereas that is not happening in the farms that are farming fruits and vegetables. But again, you know, if you're just eating the whole foods, it really isn't any more expensive. So in conclusion, I just want to say, what you eat today will determine your health tomorrow and in 10, 20, 30 years' time. And it will also determine the health of our planet. So we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our planet, we owe it to the animals to change our diet to include more plants. There are some fantastic resources that we brought along here. There's some nutrition for kids, how meat affects the planet. So if you want to grab any of those, they are free, so please feel free to grab them. And thank you so much.